Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Mark Andrew Holacek, Thomas Jefferson scholar and philosopher. And today I'd like to talk to you about Thomas Jefferson's religious views. It's a point I make in my book, American Messiah, the surprisingly simple religious views of Thomas Jefferson by Abilene Christian University Press. And I'd like to talk about whether Jefferson was really an advocate of Jeff, sit down. Was he really an advocate of freedom of religion? And the point I want to argue here, something I make in the book, is that he was more interested in toleration of different discordant religions than he was in freedom of religion. And that might be a subtle point, and maybe nothing material rides on that, but nonetheless, it's worth some discussion. Now, Jefferson's, ever since the when his bill for the establishment of religious freedom passed, I think it was in 1786, well, he was in France with the aid of James Madison. Jefferson has thereafter always been construed as a strong advocate of religious freedom. And I think that view, I want to argue here, is mistaken. Okay, to explain why, let me make a distinction that I make in the book: someone who's an advocate of religious freedom and someone who's an advocate of religious toleration. I say advocacy of religious freedom is a commitment both to sectarian religiosity, in other words, the various different religions that exist on the planet, being a good thing, and to the freedom to choose one's own religion being a decided social gain. I contrast with advocacy of religious tolerance. This is a commitment both to sectarian religiosity not being a good thing, but to lack of freedom to choose one's own religion to be a decided social ill. So again, like I said, nothing material probably rides on this distinction. In other words, uh, we're trying to discuss an issue here that takes us into the mind of Thomas Jefferson. What did Jefferson think? In other words, regardless of which view obtains, there will be the same material consequences for how the world how these things played out in the real world. So basically, I'm asking a question here: what did Jefferson think of religious sectarian religions while he was proposing and championing freedom of religion? Now, I draw upon several interesting passages that are inexplicable unless we argue that Jefferson was an advocate for religious toleration. Query 17, Notes on the State of Virginia. Jefferson says, "The way to silence religious disputes is to take no notice of them, i.e., if we allow all religions equal expression and freedom of equal expression, then in some sense we take no notice of them. They will sort of debate with each other and cancel each other out." Now, Jefferson is clear that in so many writings that religion is a personal matter, and I don't need to marshal quotes for that because they exist in superabundance. Now, what does he mean by that? In other words, we don't need to, a person can probably best express his religiosity by privately without communal expression, right? And I think he probably would have thought of communal expression as being hypocritical in some sense. Is that trying to show other people that, it's like being an honest person. When an honest person just is an honest person, you don't join a club for honest people to try to prove that you're honest. Okay. A second point, Jefferson, and it's something I talked of in another another piece, is that Jefferson thought each person was adequately equipped. Each person was adequately equipped with a moral sense, and moral sense was like our sense of seeing, our sense of hearing, our sense of touching. It was a physical faculty and he says in a letter to Cosway in 1786 that it probably was affiliated with the human heart, the organ of the heart. Jefferson being an out and out materialist, right? So if that follows, there's really, no need of moral instruction. We sense the right thing to do. Don't need to be told and taught what is right and what is wrong. Not a matter of reason. Now, Jefferson, in a letter to Thomas Law in 1814, says, "Our moral duties comprise duties to our fellow man and duties to God." He talks about the moral atheist, but in some sense, I've argued there can really be no such thing as a moral atheist. The atheist who acts morally is just someone who acts morally, right? Materially, he is a moralist, but he's not substantively a moralist because his actions are not consistent with a sort of frame of mind that needs to accompany the right thing to do. In other words, when you do the right thing, as Aristotle says in Book 2, 4 of his Nicomachean Ethics, you need to do it because of the right justification, because of the right frame of mind, the right state of being. You need to be in a state of being. You need to have the right intentions. It's easy, oftentimes, to do the right thing without doing it for the right reason, in which case, for Jefferson, it's not morally correct action. So he tells, in 1787, he tells his nephew Peter Carr, there's no need of moral instruction, right? Anymore, there's need of visual instruction. The eyes just see, the moral sense senses. You don't need to be instructed. You might need instructed vis-a-vis seeing to understand what you're seeing over time, but you don't need any instruction in the act of seeing. You just see. So our duties to man are fulfilled by, benevolent behaviors, by beneficence, by doing the sort of right things to do and being justified in doing them because of a love of our fellow human being. Our duties to God, I almost lost my, come on, get. Our duties to God are best fulfilled by, not by prayer or singing or going to church, but by doing, by science, by farming, by doing the sort of things that, by appreciation for all the things that God created. Um, it's not a matter of going to church or things like that. Jefferson says in a letter to Angela Church about his beloved Maria Cosway, who has recently joined a convent, and he says, talks about the French villagers, and he says of these peasants, they have no farmhouses, they huddle in villages, and they keep the Creator in good humor with his own works by mumbling a mass every day, right? He adds, talks about Maria Cosway going into the convent. He says, I knew that to much goodness of heart, she, Maria Cosway, joined enthusiasm and religion. But I thought that very enthusiasm would have prevented her from shutting up her adoration of the God of the universe within the walls of a cloister. It is a passage pregnant, right, with meaning. Jefferson does not think that you show your love of God by entering a convent or going into a church and mumbling a mass. You express appreciation for the God that created all things by loving all things, by farming, by transplanting plants, by study of science. Studying of science, like Einstein said, is entering in the portal of the mind of God. And Jefferson would have agreed. Now, he says to James Fishback, and this is the point he makes in many, many writings. True religion is equivalent to naturalized morality, or naturalized religion is equivalent to true morality. And the principles of true morality are duties to God and duties to man. And he argues in the letter to Fishback, truthfulness as well. Sit down, Jeff. So he says to Fishback in 1809, every religion consists of moral precepts and of dogmas. In the first, they all agree in terms of the moral precepts. All forbid us to murder, steal, plunder, bear false witness, etc. And these are the articles necessary for the preservation of order, justice, and happiness in society. You're going to fall down. Sit down. Come on, go down. He's on my desk and he's going to fall off. He doesn't pay attention. Okay, he adds in the letter, in their particular dogmas, all differ, no two professing the same. These respect vestments, ceremonies, physical opinions, and metaphysical speculations totally unconnected with morality and unimportant to the legitimate objects of society. Yet these are the questions in which have hung the bitter schisms of Nazarenes, Socinians, Arians, Athanasians in former times, and now of Trinitarians, Unitarians, Catholics, Lutherans, Calvinists, Methodists, Baptists, Quakers, etc. Among the Mohammedans, we are told that thousands fell victim to the dispute whether the first or second toe of Muhammad was longest. In what blood, how many human lives have been lost? Uh, Lives have, excuse me, in what blood, how many human lives have the words, "This do in remembrance of me," cost the Christian world? He's talking about, the preachings of Christ in the four gospels, and yet the Crusades, they're going out and slaughtering millions of, thousands and thousands of infidels in the name of God. So, Jefferson says that the principles of religion are few, love of God, love of fellow human beings, and all true religions, preach these, but then they go off and give all these metaphysical things talking about whether, Muhammad's one toe is larger than his other one, and how many angels can fit on the head of a pin, and so forth. And we get lost when we do that. All right. Jefferson, in his notes on Virginia, says it, talks about the metaphysical squabblings here. Says, it does me no injury from my neighbor to say there are 20 gods who know God. It neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg, right? Now, one can imagine that this met with a lot of derision, and, Jefferson got in trouble for this, and he certainly did. A lot of people thought this was advocacy of atheism or some such thing. It was not. Jefferson was just saying that, my own personal views, as long as I keep myself, don't do anybody else any harm. In his notes on religion, um, made in 1776, Jefferson says, laws provide against injury from others, but not from ourselves. In 1816, he writes to the wife of Samuel Harrison Smith, I have ever thought religion a concern between our God and our consciences, for which we are accountable to him and not to the priests. God himself will not save men against their will. To elaborate on religion being a personal, not a political matter, that we best serve God and profess our love of God in our own ways, right? He tells in 1800, while he's president, he tells Jeremiah Moore, talking about emblematic, politically striving clergymen, and when they engraft themselves, he says, to the machine of government, they become a very formidable engine against the civil and religious rights of man. So there needs to be a separation, at least at the federal level, between religious clerics and people who are engaged politically. That doesn't, people who are politicians can be of any religious persuasion or of no religious persuasion, but they ought best to stay away from politics. He writes to Benjamin Rush in 1805, again while he's president, I am but a machine erected for the constitution of the performance of certain acts according to laws of action laid down for me, one of which is that I must anatomize the living man as the surgeon does his dead subject, view him also as a machine and employ him for what he is fit for, unblinded by the mist of friendship. No cronyism here. Got Jefferson in the background here. He's been jumping up and acting bad the whole time. To Miles King in 1814, Jefferson says, each tree must be judged by its fruit. Stop. Okay. He says that a religion is substantially good, which produces an honest life. He adds, there is not a Quaker or Baptist or Presbyterian or Episcopalian, Catholic or Protestant in heaven. On entering that gate, we leave those badges of size of behind. What he's maintaining here, just like his advocacy of political neutrality, is that, look, sectarian religion is not a good thing. Religion is a good thing. Religion naturalizes a great thing. There can't be a Jeffersonian republic without religion. In other words, without the principles of morality being on display, which are the same thing as natural religion. When the sectarianists enter the gates of heaven, they are stripped of their sectarianism. They enter because of their commitment to duties of God and duties to man. Jefferson didn't believe in the afterlife, but he's playing lip service here. Okay, so the notion here is that the extravagancies of sectarian religions are not what makes a person good or bad person. Okay, it's the morality, um, the morality of the person, and that morality includes love of God and love of the humans. Okay, so in effect, Republican government somewhat demands, right, freedom of religion, um, and because it's not because the various sectarian religions are good things, it's that each is best, is that a government has no business telling people what to do in their free time, what to believe, or how to believe, even if they want to believe extravagantly. So the best we can hope to have is religious toleration. So we have freedom of religion, not because uh, that in itself, all the various sectarian religions being practiced is a good thing. As like he said, they're going to involve themselves in silly metaphysical squabbles. But lack of it is decidedly a social evil. So we need freedom of religion. Okay, I've got dog sitting here. I hope you enjoyed this. And the argument being is that Jefferson was not advocating freedom of religion per se, but religious toleration, right? And he said that's what people in Pennsylvania discovered, and New York also, that when you allow people to argue amongst themselves, they cancel themselves out. So if we allow freedom of toleration of religious opinion, what we'll have is on the metaphysical side, the religionists will argue among themselves to no end, and no great evil will be caused from that. While otherwise, all things will be fine in terms of people, just professing their love of God and love of fellow human beings. Hope you enjoyed this. I better get out of here before this crazy dog just goes nuts on me. Ta ta for now. Please like and share this. Thank you very much.